Imagine a wall of locked shields, a forest of forward-pointing spears, thousands of warriors moving as one solid, unstoppable block of bronze and iron. This was the Greek Phalanx, a formation that didn't just win battles, it completely dominated the ancient world for centuries, and it changed the face of warfare forever.
You know, this quote from Plutarch, it gets right to the heart of what made the Phalanx work. It wasn't just some military tactic. It was a whole new system built on just absolute discipline, unity, and some pretty advanced technology for the time. So, in this explainer, we're going to trace how this incredible formation was created, how it totally achieved supremacy on the battlefield, and the powerful legacy it left behind.
All right, so to really understand the Phalanx, we have to start with its most basic building block. This whole thing developed around the 7th century BC, and it was built around an entirely new kind of warrior, the hoplite.
Now, hoplites weren't professional soldiers like we think of today. No, they were free citizens, farmers with some property, artisans. And this is so important because they could afford their own suit of armor, their panoply. They had a real stake in defending their city-state. This whole model was revolutionary because it tied military service directly to being a citizen. These were men fighting for their own homes and freedoms, not for some king far away. The hoplite's insane effectiveness really came from his equipment. When you combined it with hundreds of other hoplites, you got that nearly impenetrable wall of both defense and offense. So let's break down the gear that made this human fortress a reality.
So this panoply, it wasn't just a random pile of gear. Oh no. It was a carefully designed system with 3 core parts: the aspis shield, the dory spear, and the zithos sword. And each piece was engineered to work perfectly together, basically forcing cooperation. Okay, the aspis shield. This thing was the absolute linchpin of the whole formation. It wasn't just your personal shield, it was a connector. It had this revolutionary argive grip with a strap for your forearm and a handle at the rim, which made it incredibly stable. But the real genius was its size. It was so big that half of your shield protected the guy next to you. You were literally defending your brother in arms, creating this solid, overlapping wall of bronze.
So, the main weapon was the dory. This long spear meant that the first few ranks of the phalanx could all attack the enemy at the same time, creating this lethal hedgehog of spear points. And that bronze spike on the back, the sartor, just a brilliant piece of design. You could use it to finish off enemies on the ground, use it as a backup weapon if your spearhead broke, or just stick it in the ground to stand it up.
And what if things got really messy? You know, if the spears broke or the whole formation just dissolved into a chaotic brawl. Well, then the hoplite would draw his xiphos. This short sword was perfect for that brutal up-close and personal fighting, where a longer blade would be totally useless to swing.
So, here's the takeaway from all this. The gear itself forced cooperation. Individual heroism, being a one-man army, that was actually discouraged for the good of the whole line. The phalanx was a human fortress, a system where the trust between the men was its greatest strength, period.
Now this whole system of unified warfare was about to face its ultimate test. The year is 490 BCE. The place, the Battle of Marathon. And here, a small Athenian force stood against the seemingly unstoppable might of the massive Persian Empire.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The Greeks were outnumbered more than 2 to 1 in infantry, and they had absolutely 0 cavalry to deal with the Persian horsemen. On paper, this should have been an impossible fight. It should have been a complete slaughter. But the Athenian general, Miltiades, had a brilliant and honestly a pretty gutsy plan. He deliberately weakened his center line and packed his best troops onto the flanks. Just as he expected, the Persians charged forward, smashing right through that thin Greek middle. But it was a trap. The stronger Greek wings just crushed the Persian flanks and then wheeled inwards, wrapping around the Persian elite and attacking them from both sides in the rear.
The result? It was absolutely devastating. The phalanx, guided by this incredible strategy, completely routed the Persian army. The historian Herodotus tells us that 6,400 Persian bodies were counted on the field. The Athenians? They lost just 192 men. It was a stunning, world-changing victory that proved the phalanx was the king of the battlefield.
But, despite its incredible power, the phalanx wasn't invincible. It was a highly specialized weapon, and that specialization came with its own set of critical weaknesses. And you can bet that smart enemies would eventually learn how to exploit them.
So the formation's greatest strength, that solid frontal power, was also its biggest weakness. It was an absolute powerhouse from the front, but it was super vulnerable on its flanks and from the rear.
It really struggled on rough ground, which could break up its cohesion. And there was this funny little quirk where the whole line would naturally drift to the right, as each guy tried to stay behind his neighbor's shield. But above all, it demanded insane discipline. If that formation broke, it was over.
Now, these weaknesses didn't go unnoticed. The formation was basically perfected later on by Philip II of Macedon and his son, Alexander the Great. They fixed its flaws by giving their soldiers the sarissa, an enormous spear, sometimes up to 6 meters long, creating an even deadlier wall of points. But here's the crucial part. They didn't rely on the phalanx alone. They integrated it into a combined arms system, with cavalry to protect those vulnerable flanks and light infantry to run ahead, creating a much more flexible and tough fighting force.
The influence of the phalanx echoed through military history long after its time in the sun had faded. Its core principles, discipline, cohesion, the power of the group, became a cornerstone of Western military thinking for centuries to come.
You can see this influence so clearly in its direct successor, the Roman legion. The Romans basically took the phalanx's core idea of disciplined heavy infantry and just evolved it. While the phalanx was one big, solid block, the Romans broke their legions into smaller, more flexible units called maniples. This gave them the ability to adapt on the fly and fight on rough terrain, directly solving the phalanx's biggest weakness. They kept the discipline but added a whole new layer of tactical flexibility the Greeks just didn't have.
Ultimately, the phalanx's greatest legacy was an idea. It was the first system to prove, decisively on the battlefield, that the collective strength of an army, bound together by trust and discipline, could be way more powerful than just sheer numbers or the skill of any one warrior.
And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? From the fields of ancient Greece all the way to the conflicts of today, has that fundamental truth really changed? I mean, in an age of drones and cyber warfare, are those simple, ancient virtues of unity and discipline, are they still the keys to victory?